Imagine coming home early from a trip and discovering your own ranch is being auctioned off by your HOA. But that's not even the worst part. When you try to stop it, someone calls 911 on you. What happened next? You won't believe it. Watch till the end. It all began a few months ago when I still thought owning a ranch on the outskirts of town was the ultimate dream come true. My sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of everyday life, a place surrounded by rolling hills, fresh air, and nothing but peaceful nature as far as the eye could see. This ranch wasn't just a property to me. It was my pride and joy, a symbol of hard work and freedom. Yet, like many properties these days, it was part of a homeowners association, or HOA, a group that honestly, I had never really thought much about. For years, the HOA was just a minor part of my life, mostly dealing with rules about lawn care, maintenance schedules, and those occasional neighborhood meetings that I barely attended because, to be honest, they felt like a waste of time. Nothing dramatic ever happened, and I thought that was the way it would always be. But as life goes, sometimes the quietest places can hold the most unexpected storms. A few months ago, I had planned a long trip out of state, something I had been looking forward to for a while, a well-needed break from work and all the pressures of daily life. Before I left, I made sure to inform the HOA board that I'd be gone for a couple of months. I paid all my dues in advance, double-checked that everything was in order, and even asked a neighbor to keep an eye on the place. I had no worries because, after all, I had done everything right. The HOA gave no indication that there was any problem, and I felt confident that my ranch would be safe and sound until I returned. But then, something completely unexpected happened. I had to cut my trip short and return home much earlier than planned, weeks ahead of schedule, in fact. When I arrived, I had no idea what I was walking into. The first thing I noticed was the strange silence around my property. No familiar sounds of the countryside, no neighbors waving hello. Then, as I pulled up to the ranch, my eyes caught sight of something that made my heart stop. Official-looking auction signs plastered all over my gates and fences. "Auction today, don't miss it!" one of the signs screamed in bold letters. I blinked, thinking maybe it was some sort of prank or mistake. But no, the flyer included details about an auction supposedly organized by the HOA. My ranch, my home, was being auctioned off. How could this be? I hadn't missed a payment. I hadn't broken any rules. My mind raced as I pulled out my phone to call the HOA office. The person who answered sounded unusually cold and evasive. When I asked why my property was being auctioned, they said it was due to unpaid fees and violations of HOA rules. But I was certain I had paid everything. When I asked for proof or any records, they dodged my questions and told me the auction was already set in motion, with no way to stop it. Then came the voice of the HOA's notorious Karen, a woman on the board known around the neighborhood for her strict attitude, sharp tongue, and a tendency to escalate even minor issues. She was the one who handled my case. Instead of clarifying, she accused me of deliberately ignoring HOA notices and rules, painting me as irresponsible and negligent. She claimed I was jeopardizing the community and that the auction was necessary to recover costs. I was flabbergasted. This wasn't just about unpaid fees, this was personal. I could hear her smugness through the phone, as if she relished the idea of taking away something I loved so much. Refusing to accept this, I told her I was coming to the ranch immediately to confront the situation face to face. I needed to see what was really going on. But little did I know, that decision would only pull me deeper into a nightmare I never expected, because the moment I showed up, things spiraled wildly out of control, and that's where the story really starts to get unbelievable. But before I get into what happened next, if you're new here, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss any updates. I promise you won't want to miss the crazy twists ahead. And here's the thing that still haunts me. How could a simple misunderstanding or error turn into something that made the HOA try to sell my ranch behind my back? How far was this Karen willing to go, and what was she really trying to hide? Trust me, you're not going to believe what happened next, and I'll reveal everything in the next part. So stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and the truth is more shocking than anything I ever imagined. When I finally drove up to my ranch earlier than expected, I was filled with excitement and relief to be home early. But that feeling quickly turned into a pit of dread the moment I pulled up to my front gate and saw those bright, bold signs plastered everywhere that screamed, "Auction today, don't miss your chance." My eyes locked on the big official-looking flyer pinned right at the entrance, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own ranch was being auctioned off. The very place I had poured my heart and soul into, the land I called home, was suddenly up for grabs to the highest bidder, as if I had abandoned it or was somehow trying to get away with something. My heart sank, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. How could this be happening? I knew I had paid every single HOA fee before I left on my trip. I was careful, responsible, and always made sure my payments were on time. It didn't add up. Feeling panicked but determined, I pulled out my phone and dialed the HOA office immediately, hoping to get answers and stop this madness before it got worse. The person who answered was surprisingly unhelpful. They told me bluntly that the auction was going forward because I supposedly had unpaid fees that had accumulated during my absence. I was dumbfounded. I told them there must be some mistake. I had paid everything before I left and even checked with them to confirm. I asked for proof, for records, for any documents that showed these alleged unpaid fees, but every time I pressed for details, I was met with vague answers, excuses, or silence. It was like hitting a brick wall. Then the call was transferred to someone on the HOA board, the infamous Karen. If you know the type, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The overly strict, nitpicking, drama-loving HOA member who seems to enjoy wielding her little bit of power like a weapon. She had that tone in her voice, sharp and dismissive, as if she already made up her mind about me and didn't care what I had to say. She accused me of deliberately ignoring notices and failing to follow community rules. She said my property was a problem and that the auction was a last resort to recover the money I owed. But here's the thing. She never showed me any actual proof. No emails, no payment reminders, nothing concrete to back up her claims. It was all just hearsay, assumptions, and a heavy dose of bad faith. I was furious. How could someone be so quick to take away my home without a shred of evidence? I felt powerless but also angry. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect and justice. The whole situation felt like a nightmare. Something out of a bad movie where the good guy gets railroaded by an overbearing bureaucrat with no concern for fairness. I told Karen I was coming to the ranch in person to see what was going on and to stop this auction before it went any further. I knew I needed to be there, standing my ground. But little did I know how much worse things would get when I showed up. Because the moment I arrived, instead of being met with reason or apology, I was met with hostility. The HOA had apparently already begun preparations for the auction, with people milling around and paperwork being signed. And Karen? She was already calling me a trespasser and threatening to involve the authorities. The thought that my own neighbor, someone who was supposed to work for the community's best interest, was turning against me so quickly was heartbreaking. I felt like a stranger on my own land. I'm sharing all of this with you because it's not just a story about a ranch or an HOA. It's about what happens when power is abused and people forget the value of fairness and common decency. If you're watching this and have ever felt powerless against a system that seems stacked against you, then you know how terrifying this can be. Before I get into what happened next, which, trust me, you're going to want to hear, I want to remind you to please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that bell so you don't miss any updates or new videos. This story is just getting started, and the twists ahead are unbelievable. So stay tuned and stay with me. Because what happened when I confronted the HOA in person completely changed everything. I'm still trying to process how far this Karen was willing to go, how she weaponized the system against me and what her true intentions were. And there's something even more shocking about this whole ordeal that I haven't told you yet. Something that will make you question everything you thought you knew about homeowners associations and what really happens behind closed doors. Believe me, you're going to want to watch the next part because the truth will blow your mind. The moment I finally stepped foot onto my own property after all the chaos, I was stunned to discover that the situation had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined, because the very next thing that happened was the HOA's infamous Karen without hesitation calling 911 on me. Yes, you heard that right. She called the police on M.E., the owner of the ranch, accusing me of trespassing and causing a disturbance on my own land. I was completely blindsided. How could someone who knew nothing of the real story go so far as to involve law enforcement in what was clearly a misunderstanding? When the police arrived, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I knew I had the deed, the mortgage papers, every single document proving beyond doubt that I owned this property. But explaining that to officers who were walking into a situation painted by one side was a nerve-wracking experience. The tension was thick as I calmly presented my case, showing them my paperwork, answering questions, and trying to keep my emotions in check. Thankfully, the officers saw through the confusion and recognized that I was the rightful owner. They made it clear that I wasn't trespassing and that I had every right to be there. But despite that moment of clarity, the damage was already done. The rumor mill in the neighborhood was buzzing, neighbors watching from their porches and driveways, some believing the HOA's version of events and others shocked and sympathetic toward me. It was clear this was no longer just a personal battle. It had become a community issue, with opinions divided and tensions rising. I couldn't just sit back and let this injustice continue. So I decided to dig deeper, determined to get to the bottom of how something so outrageous could happen in the first place. What I uncovered was even more shocking than I expected. The entire auction situation wasn't due to me neglecting my payments or breaking rules. It was actually caused by a clerical error on the part of the HOA board. Somewhere along the line, someone had mismanaged the records, creating a false appearance of unpaid fees on my account. This was a mistake, a simple administrative blunder that could have been fixed with a phone call or a meeting. But instead, it was allowed to spiral into a full-blown auction attempt against my property. What made it worse was Karen's eagerness to push forward with the auction despite this glaring error. She seemed more interested in flexing her power, asserting control, and making an example out of me than in resolving the issue fairly, or transparently. It was clear that her actions were fueled not just by a desire to uphold HOA rules, but by personal vendettas and a misplaced sense of authority. This wasn't just about unpaid fees anymore. It was about a power struggle that had turned ugly and unfair. At this point, I realized that this wasn't just an isolated mistake, but a symptom of a deeper problem within the HOA's leadership and practices. The lack of accountability and the way the board handled my situation with such reckless abandon raised serious questions about how many other homeowners might be vulnerable to similar treatment. I knew I had to fight back, not only for myself but for others who might one day find themselves victimized by this same system. I also couldn't ignore the emotional toll it took on me. How someone could weaponize bureaucracy to threaten a person's home and sense of security. If you're watching this and thinking about the power dynamics that exist in communities like mine, you understand just how terrifying it is when the people who are supposed to protect your interests end up causing harm instead. Before I dive into the next part of this story, where things get even more intense, please take a moment to like this video if you're feeling the injustice of what I've been through. Subscribe to the channel for updates, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss a new episode of this saga. I promise the next chapter is something you won't want to miss, because the truth I uncovered next shocked me to my core. The deeper I went, the more secrets I uncovered. Secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about my HOA, about my neighbors, and even about myself. Something dark and unexpected was lurking just beneath the surface, and the people involved weren't going to give up without a fight. So stay tuned, because in the next part, I'm going to reveal the truth behind Karen's real motives and the incredible lengths she went to try to take away my ranch forever. You won't believe what happened next, and I guarantee it will leave you speechless. I wasn't about to let my ranch slip away without a fight, not after everything I had been through, not after seeing how the HOA, and especially Karen, had tried to steamroll me with no regard for the truth or fairness. So, I took the first step that anyone in my position should consider. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, someone who knew the ins and outs of these complicated situations and had a reputation for standing up for homeowners like me. From that moment on, things started to shift. Together, we dug deep and gathered every piece of evidence that could prove my innocence and protect my ownership. I compiled all my payment records, showing that I had paid every fee on time and in full. I gathered every document proving my ownership, the deed, mortgage papers, everything to show this ranch was mine, without question. But more than just paperwork, I also reached out to my neighbors, people who had witnessed what was happening and who believed in fairness and truth. Many of them stepped up to provide testimonies, speaking out against the unfair treatment and confirming that there was never any unpaid balance on my account. It was powerful to have the community on my side, and it gave me strength to push forward. With all this evidence, my lawyer sent a formal notice to the HOA demanding that the auction be halted immediately. It was clear that continuing the sale of my property under false pretenses was illegal and unjust, and thankfully, the threat of legal action worked. The auction was stopped in its tracks. Karen, the very person who had pushed for the auction, was forced to admit that the whole thing was a mistake, but true to form, she didn't accept responsibility gracefully. Instead, she tried to shift blame onto the HOA system itself, claiming bureaucratic confusion, and then even tried to pin fault on me, suggesting that I had somehow contributed to the confusion by not communicating properly. It was frustrating and infuriating to watch someone dodge accountability when the damage she caused was so real and so personal. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was actually just the beginning of a bigger fight. I realized that what happened to me wasn't just about my ranch or my experience. It was about protecting the entire community from abuses of power and mistakes that could ruin lives. So I decided to take control of the narrative. I organized a community meeting and invited every resident, every member of the HOA board, and even local media to attend. This was my chance to expose what really happened, to shed light on the inner workings of the HOA that most people never see, and to make sure that no one else would have to endure the fear and uncertainty that I had faced. The meeting was packed, with neighbors who wanted answers and who wanted to understand how the situation got so out of hand. I shared all the documents and testimonies, and the room was filled with shock and disbelief as people realized how close I had come to losing my ranch over a clerical error and one person's thirst for control. The local reporters asked tough questions, and the HOA board was put on the spot in a way they hadn't anticipated. Some members tried to defend the process, but many had no idea about the extent of the chaos caused by the auction attempt. The whole event sparked a serious conversation about transparency, fairness, and the need for reform in how the HOA operated. I left that meeting feeling empowered, but also cautious, knowing that the battle wasn't completely over. Karen's influence was strong, and I suspected she wouldn't back down quietly. But the support from my community and the public scrutiny had shifted the balance of power. If you're watching this, please make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. The drama is far from over, and the next chapter reveals some of the darkest secrets behind Karen's motives and the HOA's hidden agenda. You won't believe what I discovered after the meeting. Secrets that could change everything for our neighborhood and for me. So stick around, because what's coming next will shock you and make you question who you can really trust. The community meeting I organized turned out to be one of the most important moments in this whole ordeal, not just for me, but for everyone living in our neighborhood. After hearing the evidence, seeing the paperwork, and listening to neighbors' testimonies, the HOA board could no longer ignore the glaring problems in how they had handled my case. There was no way to spin the truth anymore. The pressure from the community, coupled with the media's attention, forced the board to admit that their procedures were flawed, their communication had been poor, and worst of all, their system was vulnerable to abuse and mistakes like the one that almost cost me my ranch. As a direct result, they agreed to implement major reforms aimed at increasing transparency and accountability. These changes meant that every homeowner would get clearer, more frequent updates about fees, notices, and any potential actions against their property. They promised better communication channels so no one would be left in the dark or face surprises, like I did. And crucially, they committed to reviewing and improving their internal processes so that no clerical error could ever escalate into an attempted auction without multiple checks and balances. But what about Karen? Well, the community had had enough of the drama and the way she abused her position for personal gain. Faced with mounting criticism and the clear loss of trust from her neighbors, She had no choice but to step down from her position on the HOA board. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that the era of unchecked power and intimidation was over, at least for now. For me personally, this outcome was more than just a victory. It was a lesson and a reminder of how important it is to stand up for yourself, even when the odds feel overwhelming. I got my ranch back without losing a single penny or a moment of peace, but that peace came from fighting hard, being informed, and refusing to be bullied by someone who thought their little badge gave them the right to threaten my home. This whole experience taught me that no matter who you are or what situation you're in, knowing your rights, keeping your paperwork organized, and having the courage to confront injustice head-on can save you from losing everything you've worked for. If you're watching this and you're part of an HOA or you own property anywhere, please stay vigilant. Mistakes happen all the time, and sometimes they're innocent errors, but other times they're part of bigger problems within the system. Having the right knowledge, legal support, and a community that stands behind you can make all the difference between losing your home or protecting it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story. If this video helped you, or if you found my journey inspiring, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and ring that bell so you never miss an update. Sharing this story could help someone else avoid the nightmare I went through, and that means more than words can say. But before I let you go, there's one last thing I need to tell you. Something shocking that I uncovered only after Karen left the board. Something that changes everything about this story and the people involved. It turns out that the auction was just the tip of the iceberg, and what I found next exposed secrets about the HOA's finances and hidden agendas that could rock this whole community to its core. I'm still uncovering the full truth. But trust me, it's big, it's wild, and it will change the way you think about power, trust, and justice in neighborhoods like mine. So stay tuned for the next video, because what I'm about to reveal will blow your mind, and it might just save your home one day too. Thanks so much for watching and being part of this journey with me. If you want to make sure you never miss any updates or the next shocking part of this story, please hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to turn on the bell notification and set it to all. That way, you'll be the first to know whenever I post something new. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more with you soon. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.